Thank you for coming today. I'm attorney Gloria Allred, and with me is Christina Cardenas and John Carpenter, my co-counsel. I'll be reading a statement, then Christina will read her statement. John is going to say whatever he wishes to say and also be available to answer questions. And then also we have some photos to show you at the end, which you may use, of Christina and her husband. We're here today to announce the filing of a lawsuit on behalf of Christina Cardenas against, among others, the California Correctional Institution, CCI, California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, Adventist Health Tehachapi Valley, because of the outrageous, unlawful, and unconstitutional violation of Christina's rights on September 6, 2019, after she arrived at CCI for a previously scheduled family visit with her husband, Carlos Eugene Cardenas, who was an inmate at CCI. Following are the factual and the legal allegations which were made in our lawsuit, which was filed this morning in Kern County Superior Court. Christina arrived at the CCI facility at approximately 8:30 a.m. to appear for a scheduled family visit with husband Carlos Cardenas. The scheduled family visit was to be the first in approximately 1 year, as the previously scheduled visit for 4 weeks prior to the incident, giving rise to this action, had been canceled without any notice. As with the day of the subject incident, she had traveled between 232 and 239 miles, requiring approximately 4 hours of travel time to visit her husband. On September 6, 2019, she presented to the visiting office of CCI. An officer escorted her to the back right-hand side of the visiting office, sat her down, and placed her belongings on the adjacent table. Christina was then interrogated regarding whether she had, quote, brought anything with her, end quote, and whether, quote, she, quote, brought drugs in, end quote. Christina truthfully denied it. An officer then informed Christina that a search warrant had been issued and that an officer would be coming to the office to discuss. She asked whether she would be strip searched, which the officer confirmed. This began the emotional damages suffered by Christina, as she had previously been the victim of an unwarranted, degrading, and traumatizing search by the state of California on the day of her marriage to her husband. Christina was then presented with a legally invalid search warrant issued at approximately 8:38 a.m. on September 6, 2019. We believe that no statement of probable cause was served on her in conjunction with the search warrant, which violated her constitutional rights. While the validity and manner in which the search warrant was executed is in question, the warrant did limit the scope of the potential search in the absence of Christina's consent, and Christina did not consent to an invasive search of her body. It was explicit in the warrant, and we will provide a copy of the warrant to you, that a body cavity search could only be conducted after an X-ray confirmation of the presence of a foreign object likely to be contraband in the body cavity of Christina. An officer informed Christina that pursuant to the warrant, she would be strip searched, in addition to officers searching all of her belongings and her vehicle. She was visibly distressed by the subject of the search, as well as her detainment in the isolated room with unknown officers crowding the single exit. One unknown officer screamed at her, "Oh, wipe away your tears. You know what you and your husband have been doing." Despite this effort of intimidation completed in their individual and their official capacities under the color of state law, and or in the course and scope of the unknown officer's employment, Christina responded through tears, "Don't tell me to wipe away my tears. I'm innocent, and what you are saying to me is inappropriate." Shortly thereafter, Christina was left in the small room with 3 officers. She was then unlawfully examined by the officers, first by opening her mouth and sticking out her tongue, then by showing her ears and turning her head upside down to shake out her hair. No contraband was found during the search. Christina was then unlawfully instructed to take her clothing off, piece by piece, and hand them to the officers for inspection. This process began with her top, sports bra, then bra, which left her completely exposed on her top half. Christina attempted to keep her breasts covered as she was asked to remove her pants for inspection. Finally, she was asked to remove her undergarments, which left Christina's breasts and genitalia completely exposed. No contraband was found on Christina's person at this time either. Christina was then asked and instructed to unlawfully to squat over a mirror placed on the ground and cough. When Christina's efforts proved that there was nothing placed in her cavity, the officers unlawfully instructed her to squat wider apart and to spread her genitalia with physical intervention. Upon a negative finding of contraband, Christina was instructed to dress and sit back down to await further instruction. She was then asked, "Why do you visit, Christina? You don't have to visit. It's a choice, and this is part of visiting." We believe that the unknown officer's statement was a form of intimidation used to dismiss Christina's right to visit her lawful husband during the course of his incarceration. After being subjected to the strip search, Christina asked the officer if she could use the restroom, as she had not been able to use it since arriving to the CCI facility after a nearly 4-hour drive. This request was denied. Another officer then arrived, pulled her out of the detained room, and placed her in handcuffs. Christina was then transported to Adventist Health's emergency department with 3 CCI officers and arrived at approximately 9:45 a.m. Christina was subjected to the equivalent of a perp walk, as she was driven to the back of the hospital, removed from the back of the law enforcement vehicle, and walked, while handcuffed, to the Adventist Health entrance with numerous individuals in observation. This conduct, perpetrated by 3 CCI officers, was a form of harassment and intimidation, which subjected Christina to, without limitation, emotional distress, pain, suffering, inconvenience, mental anguish, embarrassment, humiliation, and damage to her reputation. An Adventist Health doctor then unlawfully forced Christina to complete a pregnancy test. Prior to completing the unwanted pregnancy test, Christina requested water. This request was allegedly denied due to a possibility of emergency surgery. She was denied reasonable access to bathroom facilities. She was given neither the privacy of a normal restroom nor the comfort of a normal toilet. Rather, Christina was forced to urinate in a makeshift toilet consisting of a chair and exposed urinal pan. This was done in the presence of an Adventist Health nurse and a female officer. Christina then had to answer personal questions regarding her medical history, including personal women's health history and mental health, in front of the officer, in complete violation of her rights to privacy and HIPAA protections. She was unlawfully restrained in handcuffs for hours. As she waited to be unlawfully violated by the defendants, she was subjected to further questioning and ridicule by the present officers. She was continually denied water and food while the officers snacked and chatted in supervision. Christina was then escorted to a wheelchair by an officer to present for illegal X-ray imaging. She was imaged both standing and laying down. The X-ray study conclusively proved that Christina had no foreign substance in her body. After the X-ray, in violation of the express terms of the illegal search warrant, Christina was subjected to an unwanted CT scan. While Christina received the CT scan, approximately 2 Adventist Health Hospital staff and 3 present officers observed her. She was handcuffed during the duration of the CT scan. As she had metal buttons on the waist of her pants, she was illegally instructed to lower her pants while handcuffed in the presence of Adventist Health and CCI employees. She struggled to lower her pants while crying and bound in handcuffs. She was then brought back to the hospital room. Despite prior statements of officers and hospital staff regarding potential emergency surgery, she was finally given some water and acetaminophen. At this time, Christina was incredibly dehydrated and hungry. After both the illegal drug test, illegal X-ray study, and the illegal CT study conclusively proved that there was no foreign substance in Christina's body, the doctor proceeded to sexually assault and forcibly penetrate Christina's anus and vagina. The express terms of the illegal search warrant prohibited a cavity search in the absence of X-ray confirmation of illegal contraband. The unwanted and forceful penetration of Christina's vagina and anus was perpetrated by a male doctor, even after Christina stated that she was not okay with a male probing her body, and that a male probing of her body would be very re-traumatizing to her. Notwithstanding her objections and protests, the male doctor continued, and an officer remained in the room during the unwanted and forceful penetration of Christina's vagina and anus. Christina was illegally forced to remove her pants, which she attempted to do despite being handcuffed, crying and hyperventilating. She was sobbing uncontrollably and in a clear and visibly distressed state as she was forced to sit on a table and spread her legs. The doctor then began to violate and penetrate Christina's vaginal area using grabbing motions with fingers. The doctor then violated and penetrated Ms. Cardenas' anal cavity, performing the same grabbing motions with his fingers. The doctor's violation and penetration of Christina's body was unwanted, illegal, and violative of the express written language of the illegal warrant. The violation and penetration of Christina's body was done under threat and intimidation by the defendants. The defendant's unwanted violation of her vaginal and anal cavity constituted, without limitation, sexual battery, unwanted sexual conduct, and unwanted and forceful penetration of Christina's vagina and rectum. Christina was visibly shaken, ill, sobbing, and otherwise emotionally disturbed as a result of the bodily violations performed by the doctor. Still bound by handcuffs, she lay on her side crying. To add insult to injury, Christina was forced to pay the bill for the sexual abuse and unlawful penetration of her vaginal and anal cavities. She was then illegally forced into a law enforcement vehicle. Crying and still bound by handcuffs, she was driven back to the CCI facility. Although she was told that she was no longer being detained, the defendants refused to take off the handcuffs that restrained Christina's body. No contraband existed or was ever found in Ms. Cardenas' belongings, vehicle, or person. Nevertheless, she was denied scheduled visitation with her husband, unlawfully detained for hours denied basic necessities of life, taken to a second facility for search, subjected to a humiliating perp walk in front of medical professionals and passerbys, and ultimately forced into extensive radiology and traumatizing penetrations of her vagina and anal cavities. She was then forced to pay for the state-sanctioned torture. When Christina returned to the CCI facility, an officer returned her belongings. Christina asked the officer if she could return the next day for a normal visit with her husband. The officer left the room to inquire, and another officer returned to the room and rudely questioned Christina as to what she wanted. Christina repeated her question regarding a normal visit. The officer informed her that her visit was canceled. As a result of what Christina was forced to suffer, we filed a lawsuit this morning in Kern County Superior Court, alleging sexual battery, gender violence, sexual harassment, violations of the California Unruh Civil Rights Act, violations of the California Bain Act, violations of the California Ralph Act, negligent hiring and retention, negligent supervision, intentional infliction of emotional distress, negligent infliction of emotional distress, false imprisonment, invasion of privacy, and intrusion into private affairs. We are seeking damages according to proof at trial. In addition, we're seeking an injunction, that's a court order, to stop the practice of body cavity searches of women seeking scheduled family visits with their spouses. We are very proud of the courage demonstrated by our client, Christina Cardenas. She decided to take this action, not only to vindicate her own rights, but also to protect the rights and the dignity of other wives who are seeking family visits with their incarcerated husbands. And now I present Christina Cardenas. She will read her statement in English. If there's anyone here afterwards who would like her to read her statement in Spanish, she'll be happy to do so. Christina Cardenas.
On September 6th, 2019, I traveled to CCI, expecting to have a family visit with my husband in a weekend filled with love and laughter. I not only did not get to visit my husband, but instead I was met with hostility by the CCI officers and forced into demeaning, humiliating situations. I was bullied and treated as though my body, my person, and my character, and I myself did not matter. I am married to and in love with an incarcerated man. This is not a crime. It does not make me a criminal. In the culmination of their repeated attempts to prove me a criminal, I believe to justify their abuse, I was sexually violated. I am still in shock, and I don't believe I've yet come to terms with the full capacity of the sickening nature of the sexual violation that occurred at the hands of the officers and the medical doctor. I have experienced and continue to experience a range of emotions, from feeling debilitated and frozen and helpless to bewilderment and disbelief to outrage. Why, as an innocent woman, was I left battered and sexually violated? No woman should have to suffer the atrocity of what was inflicted upon me. This is why I'm here. My desire is to right this wrong, and shed light on the abuse of power and injustices that are committed on the family members and friends of the incarcerated who only wish to visit their loved ones.
My name is John Carpenter, Zuckerman, and Rowley. This is just another example of what happens when prejudice mixes with power. When prejudice mixes with power, people get hurt. Prejudice and power don't mix. Because Christina was a woman, because Christina was in love with a man who was incarcerated, the correctional officers were prejudiced against Christina. They sought a warrant against her that did not have probable cause. And when they asked her if she had drugs, and she said no, they didn't believe her because they were prejudiced. When they took a drug test of her illegally, and it was negative, they didn't believe her. When they took an x-ray of her body, which showed conclusively that there was no drugs in her body or carrying her, they didn't believe the x-ray. Prejudice blinds you from the truth, and without truth, there can be no justice. Justice equals truth plus love. And without the truth, you can't get to justice. So after they saw the x-ray was negative, what did they do? They went beyond the language of the search warrant, and the radiologist suggested a CT scan. No one was reading the search warrant. The search warrant only allowed Ms. Cardenas to voluntarily give any contraband. But since she had no contraband, she couldn't give it. So they probed, they x-rayed, they CT scanned, and with every protest, their prejudice just told these officers that she was guilty. It just didn't matter what evidence Ms. Cardenas gave them to prove her innocence. Their prejudice blinded them from the truth. Negative x-rays were not enough. Negative CT scans were not enough. Having her squat over a mirror and spreading her vagina open to see inside was not enough for these correctional officers. Nothing was sufficient for these correctional officers because their prejudice blinded them to the truth. And that's wrong. And that can't happen. This is what happens when power meets prejudice. This is what happens when power doesn't follow procedure. This is what happens when people abuse their power. The more Christina cried, the more she protested her innocence, the correctional officer's prejudice was just reinforced. This is what guilty people do. They cry and they protest. Look at the guilty person cry. She was innocent. And the more she protested her innocence, the more she said she was innocent, the more she was abused. This has to stop. This is disgusting. It's criminal. And nothing is happening. When we posed this claim to the state of California, they denied it in a day. Nothing has happened to these correctional officers. Nothing has happened to these doctors who failed to even look at the search warrant and see that they were violating it with every examination, with every x-ray, with every CT scan. That's what happens with prejudice. That's the danger of prejudice, and it has to stop. Thank you. Yes? Do you want it to read in Spanish?
What was the question?
She can do the statement in Spanish, but why don't we do that after we have any, if there's any questions?
I'll do it in Spanish for you after. Okay.
Are there any questions for Gloria?
Are there any questions?
They denied you one day, what happened?
Excuse me?
But they denied you in one day, so what happens if they deny it?
It's a first step for filing of a lawsuit, and so we filed the claim, and it was denied, and so we filed the lawsuit today. But the state of California and the correctional facility didn't even take the time to consider what's going on here. So that's why we filed this lawsuit, to right this wrong.
I want to add that I've heard many complaints from wives who try to visit their spouses, and they're just not being treated with dignity and respect. They make many sacrifices. They sometimes have to get child care. They have to take off from work, drive hundreds of miles, hours and hours and hours to go to the prison to give support to their spouses who are incarcerated. And having them there is a good thing for the spouse. It gives them hope. It gives them love. It gives them support. And it's good for the correctional officers, because if it's good for the morale for the prisoner, it's good for the correctional officers who manage the prisoners. It's this policy of the state of California that family members have a right to those visits, and to arbitrarily and cruelly deny those visits to family members is wrong, it's not lawful, and we're going to do something about it. And that's why we're asking for not only damages for her, but also for an injunction to stop the unlawful searches of bodily cavities of the spouses who visit. If there's no contraband, there's no reason for that. So we have two photos. Christina, I guess we'll have to put our masks on if you want to come up and hold one of them. It doesn't matter, you're just going to show it here. You can stand on the other side. Which one was taken on your wedding day?
Neither of these.
This one?
Neither of these.
I need it. It's all right. Okay, and we'll also, we can leave them up here if you want to get it closer.